Hey everyone, welcome to the Cash Heroes series, a place where we talk finance, cash, and stories of people behind it. For today's episode, we have Amit Sharma with us, a chartered accountant by nature who has built and scaled the finance function at Whatfix during its hyper growth phase. We want to highlight his story on how he managed finance in a fast growing SaaS startup. Hey Amit, thanks for joining in. Welcome to the Cash Heroes series.
Thanks, Arvind. Pleasure's all mine to be part of it.
What would be the role of a finance executive who's joining a fast growing environment? What are the kind of problems, priority problems they need to address first, and how does it evolve over time? Just an overview on it would help.
Got it. So, Arvind, I'll actually go step back a little bit. I think more from what you need to possess from finance skills. It's very important to know what kind of person you are before you step into these kind of companies, because they are very fast. Before you know it, you're already hitting X amount of ARR, and the growth is very, very fast. So I think you need to understand what type of talent you need to bring into the system. People who are hungry, people who want to learn, people who want to grow in their career, I think is very key fundamental characteristics that you need to find in a particular person, especially in finance. I feel finance is, for the lack of a better word, I think it's a very hard profession to be in, because it's very simple for you as a CEO to say, Amit, why don't you give me the trend of the GOY split of the past 2 years? It's a one sentence, right? And it took you literally 5 seconds to say that. But for us to ensure that the data is clean to give you that report, it can take us anywhere between 15 minutes to around 20 minutes. So I think it's a very hard job to do. So I think from that perspective, you need to be hardworking, hungry, and you also want to thrive in your career. I think these are the first key aspects from a characteristics of that particular person. From when I look at it, once you're into the system and you're working for that particular company, I think the core lies in that you need to treat that company as your own. Even though you are the CEO, even though you're not the CEO, the moment you bring that attribute that, listen, I think I want to be part of this company and I want to contribute significantly and treat this as my company, the mindset of you being a day job 9 to 6 changes, where you're thinking, eating, sleeping that particular problem of that company, and eventually you reach a point of trying to perfect that particular function. So I think knowing that you own the company is also very, very key. But it can be it's so small, but it has a severe impact on performance of that particular team as well as the company. So I think a combination of these two aspects. I don't think any field, for example, finance, HR, tech for that matter, a product is not rocket science. We are all studied it, we see it, we learn it every day. Everything is new, and we can consume it pretty fast. But I don't think anything is rocket science. So I think this core fundamental can become the bedrock of performance for that particular function, and eventually it will flow up back into the company. You need to have somebody who wants to get his hands dirty. People love to be in their comfort zone. The moment you say, listen, can you go and take the lead in a fundraise? Of course, for the first time, you're going to be jittery through and through the entire process, and you may fumble to a very large extent, where the due diligence or any other process during the entire fundraise can get delayed. But I think having confidence and getting your hands dirty and getting out of your comfort zone was also another key parameter to sort of do this. People love to stay in their comfort zone. They have to step out in case they need to actually be the next greatest leader in finance in their particular domain.
Interesting. Now, valuable insights, right? So, makes sense. So, which actually the one you mentioned on, what kind of a person should hire, and, what would be the clear characteristics and, the kind of things that you need to exhibit when you join in, leads me to the, even a step back, right? Even a first question. This is more from a founder's perspective, right? When do you think in a fast growing environment, a startup, should a founder or a person should look for a finance executive, right? What is the right time, right? And what are the initial problem statements that you think, as a finance person who's joining in, next to the founder, right, should immediately start solving? What are the high priority items that you think that they should get started immediately?
So I'm going to disclaimer my following sentence. I don't have anything against CFOs, but I think as a founder, when the company is in its nascent stage, trying to build up to growth stage or maturity stage, I don't think CFO is a right candidate for a particular founder to hire immediately. You need to have somebody who's in the mid-range, where you so-called give him her carrot to say that, listen, put your gut and your heart and soul into this, because then for you the probability of reaching CFO is way faster than getting somebody else. You have two advantages as a founder. Number one, the person is very committed, because you have showed him the path that, listen, he can become a CFO. Maybe it takes a little bit longer, but then you have somebody who knows the foundation of the particular company through and through. It becomes very simple as the company scales, that this person can manage data, can keep the data clean, can give you reports that is very insightful for the management, not only the founder but the management as a whole. And then I feel once a point where you think you hit a certain level of ARR. Now there's no rule book to this, but let's assume you hit 50 million, 70 million, 80 million, 90 million. I think at that point of time is when you actually promote the person that's there. If you think he's capable to manage the larger show, promote him to a CFO or get another CFO from outside. What I did is understand the core business first. Firstly, my point was not to understand what the product did, but what the numbers are looking like. What are people on the floor talking numbers? What is the CS head talking? Which number is he talking? What number the sales head is talking? What number the partnership head is talking? What number is actually the CEO talking? If you feel that there's too much disparity between these 5 core people that manage numbers in an organization, then you have a bigger problem, which means that this person actually needs to go down right to grassroots level from inception to actually see what's the trend, what's happening, what documentation you had to arrive at what number, why did you use what fundamental to arrive at the today's ARR. Once that is sorted, I think usually companies have the tendency of following Excel sheets. At that point of time, of course, you're looking at conserving cash, not too much bandwidth. People are wearing several hats at the same time. I think automation, once the base is stabilized, is a huge plus point, not only to the finance person that's doing the work, but also to the organization at a large. Once that automation field comes in, 90% of everybody's time is saved. And now that core finance person can sit down and try to be more efficient in the current processes that are there on the table. That's something that if I had maybe a magic wand, I would go back in time and definitely do that. It took me some amount of time to understand how efficient can automation be. But I think that's one piece of advice that I would tell people: set the ground foundation rock solid, immediately move into whatever you can automate, move into that very aggressively. And then I think the third would be hiring. But I think from an overall perspective, get in, feel the ground. If the ground is unstable, find out why it's unstable, try to fix those issues. Once, because at the end of it, when you look at it from a finance professional, right, of course, accounting is the core bedrock of all of your analysis, the numbers. If that is again not stable, you're not going to get a right picture of any analysis that you do. Once you set that layer rock solid, I think going forward, you can slice and dice any information in any aspect, in any sphere, in any geo, in any way that you want. So I think that fundamental bedrock setting is very, very important for that person to do immediately as soon as he joins on day zero.
Let's say you've joined in, you're in a growth phase, because in a fast growing environment, things move super fast, right? On a quarterly basis, monthly basis, you're closing deals left, right, center, right? Your team's hiring fast. You have to hire more people. You can't be stingy about when you want to hire, etc., etc. Hiring, putting up processes, systems, stabilizing that also have to happen at lightning pace. Now, given that context, how has your role evolved over time, and how did you structure the team, process, people, and also systems in place, right, over time? And what do you think you could have done right as well? So these are the two questions related to that.
Got it. So this answer may be a little bit lengthy because I want to set the background accurately as to how did I start, and then we'll come to the things that I would love to change. So I started exactly what I mentioned. I came in as the first hire of finance at Whatfix. My role at that point of time to first stabilize accounting compliances, which is the standard practice. So I did that for close to around a quarter or a little bit more than a quarter, set all of those processes right. I then moved into the core basic, which is how do we formalize the numbers of ARR? What terminology should trigger you to understand that this is a ARR versus this is a one-time? That I did for a significantly large part of the first year that I joined. I think the remaining balance of the first year that I joined was only into that. Then there was also we raised 3 rounds of funding in 3 consecutive years. And I had to do Series B at that point of time. So it was actually a mixy, for the lack of a better word. I was still trying to fix the compliances. I was still trying to fix the accounting. I was still trying to fix the ARR. I was trying to get a uniform choir internally that this is the number that we are at today, because investors during the due I'm sure you know that they actually look at the ARR numbers with a magnifying lens. The others can be not there yet, but can be fixed, and which they're okay with. But ARR numbers is something that they want spot on. So at that point of time, I was still managing all of this in Excel. I remember whenever a new deal used to come in, we used to actually audit what that new deal came in, look at the documentation, go to my Excel file, which was like very, very large, and then go and put that unique customer over there saying this is the start date, this is the end date, this is the ARR. Because at that point of time, our CS renewal also hadn't evolved. So it was very critical that I had those dates spot on from a renewal perspective as well, because you don't want to carry forward that ARR, which is not renewed for a long time, present that to the board, and then you realize that you need to backtrack to change those numbers because that deal never renewed. So doing that, I think, was majority of my day's life, in fact, because at that point of time, deals started coming in to a very large extent on a daily basis. So deal gets closed, congratulations email comes out, you go to your Excel, you start tracking all of it, ensure invoice goes out. Now, does this customer need a PO, does not need a PO, etc., etc. So I think a lot of my time got wasted on that. And therefore, my hiring got delayed, my automation of systems got delayed. Sooner or later, by time I could ponder on getting all of this sorted, there was another fundraise. We raised Series C at that point of time, so I was still lagging. And at that point of time, I realized that if I wait for the sun to rise from the east, it's not going to happen. It's something that you need to do. You need to do in parallel. Automation, normal work, reports for management, fundraisers, as well as hiring, all had to be done in tandem. And I feel at that point of time, I think post 1.5 years into Whatfix is when I actually upped my game. I think the reflection point was that, listen, if I don't do it, I know will do it currently in the system, because at that point of time, my founders actually put all of their poker chips on me to see this through. So at that point of time, I decided, listen, it's now take it or leave it kind of a scenario. And that's when I buckled up and I said, okay, let's do all of it together. There was a lot of sacrifice. There was a lot of time put into work every day consistently. And that's when I got automation, which is of the ARR numbers, but I didn't focus too much on the other automation, but getting that ARR, getting me away from that Excel sheet was what happened at that point of time. Once that I knew that the system was very, very stable, I actually sat back and thought about it as how did my life change prior to Excel and post this tool that coming in. And I actually thought that, listen, how about I automate at least 95% of my finance? And at that point of time, I became very, very aggressive. I was overshooting budgets of finance. Not a great example, but I was overshooting budgets of finance because at that point of time, I had convinced the management that, listen, this is the best way to go. Let's get aggressive today, because once the numbers get ballooned up, it's going to be a climb to Mount Everest without oxygen, quite honestly. You cannot manage that scale of numbers, because every day then will be a reconciliation, and that's hard to do when you're automating. So at that point of time, we moved our ERP, we got a good ARR automation software, we got an accounts receivable software, and that's how the journey went from that time. if I want to, again, like I said, if I want to change something, I think if that wake up call was a little bit faster, where I would give due respect to the tech aspect of automation, I think I would do that on day zero. I would say that, listen, I'm going to start evaluating tools while I actually put the foundation of these numbers rock solid. I'm going to start evaluating because the testing is going to take time. I would do that on day zero.
Great. This is useful. I want to now get into the core. It gives a fair understanding of, what is the role that a finance person needs to do as soon as they join a fast-growing environment, when they should join, and what are the first-order problems they need to solve, and what are the things they could do upfront to, pitfalls that they could avoid and do upfront to get things done. This is helpful for folks who are joining now or planning to join into a new environment, right? Moving on to the next topic, next segment is metrics, right? And I want to start with this question first, right? What is your MIS today? How does it look for a SaaS, fast-growing SaaS environment?
Got it. So my MIS, a little bit of a longer answer. My MIS was the basic P&L that anybody would do, regardless of it being in SaaS. We evolved quickly to actually start doing a lot of matrices. Now, the problem with SaaS is that, or the limitation today with SaaS is that everybody has their own unique terminology. So gross margin for you may not be gross margin for me. It's unique, right? It's still yet to reach that maturity from a terminology perspective. So what we did at Whatfix is we, of course, did the core really, really well. We broke AR segment wise because we wanted to actually see which segment is contributing more, which segment should we stick on, which segment should we move forward. So breaking ARR into core segments, maybe SMB versus enterprises, is a way to start your MIS. Also, once you have that core set in, to do the basic GRR, NRR also gives you a good flavor of how are the segments performing. There is always an inherent risk with an SMB sector where, for example, if there's one pandemic, then the business is totally kaput, right? I mean, that's just how SMBs function. So should you actually move from a SMB heavy to an enterprise? That's another decision that you can make with these graphs and trend lines that you see during the course of the business. We also started then going a little bit lower and more deeper. We broke all of these core numbers geo-wise to actually understand which geo is doing what with the core fundamental of ARR, NRR, GRR. What are these geos doing? Also, what we started doing is another key fundamental is how do you track CAC? I think that I feel is a showstopper. What we did at Whatfix is that while we implemented the ERP, we were very cognizant about ensuring that we have the right cost centers, and each of the expenses or the invoice that you raise gets tagged against that particular cost center. So let me explain the revenue side as well as the expense side. Now, let's say that finance bought a tool. That tool, even though it's used for the entire organization, we will tag that particular invoice from that particular vendor into finance. Now, let's assume you're in the sales team. You are the person that closed a particular deal. That invoice gets tagged against sales. If you are in CSM team, that same deal that came 1 year out, when it came for renewal, if you raise that invoice, that particular invoice goes and gets tagged against CS team. So we were very, very cognizant, and we wanted to ensure that our cost center is spot on to the T, because when you pull up CAC is so large a term, but it has several impact to your parameters from a SaaS perspective. If that core fundamental is not built in your ERP, you're again going to sit down with your Excel, look at all of the costs, look at everything, and then sit for reconciliation, which is a disaster. When we actually generate our P&L at month end, we just say generate P&L, and the P&L comes out cost center wise, which means when we are making our actual MIS for the ARR or for the investors, we actually pull all of these costs into those MIS and you arrive at the CAC. I think that core fundamental, if you build in, is very, very essential. We also closely track accounts receivable. Now, the mindset from again, a very general statement, not to put a finger on anybody, but the mentality in general is that if you raise an invoice to a customer, you think that the job is over. But the larger problem is that the money needs to come and show as credit in your bank account. I think that's the main part, and that's how the process gets completed of sales. You can't just close the deal, raise the invoice, and say my job is over. It is actually pushing the customer to give that to you in time. What we started doing initially from a very early stage is track accounts receivable. We would ensure that a very insignificant portion, if at all, is sitting post 60 days, which means that we fuel our cash flow or our working capital to a very large extent from the money that we generate from the investors. Two things get solved with this. A, you're always on top of your customers. That point of contact is a lot more frequent, which shows your professionalism as a company. And also you're using and saving all of your investors' money for the larger game. It can be acquisition, it can be buying a lot of tools that can simplify the process, it can be any other sort of cornerstone cases which are one-time event but cost a lot of money. So you save that money for the time that you need. What we started doing is breaking this AR twofold. We broke this as new customer versus existing customer, because we also wanted to see how fast a new customer gives the money, how fast an existing customer gives money. Yeah. Our standard credit terms were anywhere 90% of our customers do 30 days out, very few do 60, and so on and so forth. So what we started doing is tracking what are the number of days post the credit period is when the money comes in. We were doing not so great earlier, where it was a double-digit number, but today it's down to a single-digit number, which means that 30 days out or 40 days out, whatever you sold, all that money comes into the system. And then you say, and you always have that working capital running without calling for mutual funds and FD redemptions, which actually are a free cash that is there on the table, which but companies actually blow that free cash because they don't manifest their working capital to its most highest efficiency. So in short, in a nutshell, my MIS looks as follows. I have core ARR matrices, which is in a summary form. I have ARR, GRR, NRR broken down geo-wise, broken down segment-wise. I do a skew of enterprise breakdown, SMB breakdown, and then I have core financial matrices like my CAC, my LTV, my payback period, what does my inflow, outflow, burn look like, what's my end cash balance. So in a nutshell, that's how my MIS looks like.
Can you give us one anecdotal example from your experience of how this data that you tracked by geo, by segments, etc., understanding maybe cost benefit analysis out of the ARR that you generate from a particular segment, CAC versus LTVs, etc., and use that into an actionable business decision that you have taken? How does it translate in a fast growing environment? And who are all the people involved as well?
Sure. So I'll cite a pretty recent example that came up. So when you actually have budget plans, you have very aggressive targets. Now the begging question over there is, how will you reach that target? So let's say that I come up to you, Arvind, and say that you as the you as the sales head, I come up to you and say that, listen, I want 30 million out of you next year. On top of your head, you think that 27 is possible, 30 may not be, it's a stretch, but I'll give it a shot, and you convince me to do it. Now, let's say there is a finance person that comes up to you and says, tell me, how will you achieve 27 million? Forget about 30 million. How will you achieve 27 million? What's your strategy? How are you going to get that done? With these numbers in place, what I can actually help Arvind as a sales guy is that tell Arvind or give Arvind an insight as to saying, I think you should track these sectors because our product on these sectors have shown a hit rate which is very high. So why don't you devise or speak to marketing team to say, give me tech, give me oil and energy, give me fintech, give me banking. These are my top 4 sectors where I think my hit rate is really good. Try to chase and get demos of these companies because I know I can do well from past record. To further drill down, to help you further, I can say that out of these 4 sectors, these are the applications where you have deployed your product, which is working seamlessly. How am I saying that it's working seamlessly? I have actually tracked net new ARR of that application against that particular sector. So let me further explain what that means. Let's say that you sold Salesforce to a tech company from past 4 years. I am consuming all of that 4 years data. I'm going to tag what is new, what is opening ARR, what is new ARR, what is expansion ARR, what is churn, what is downsell. And I'm going to give you a percentage of net new ARR on your opening ARR against Salesforce to a tech company. That way I can actually predict and tell you, out of past 4 years trend, this is what gives you the highest hit rate. Don't go behind a custom app or a Workday or a ServiceNow to an oil and energy company, because that hit rate is very poor. So with this data insight, you can actually help revenue targets to be met seamlessly, as against going and chasing the target with having partial insight or no insight on the data. So these kind of decisions actually help a large way. And a good practice that we have, at least in our company, is that every week the department heads meet up and discuss what's happening in their department. It can be something very small. So let's assume, let me take my example, what we do in my department meeting. I actually walk through one set of ARR, I walk through one set of core finance, and I actually have one set that talks about case studies that we encountered during that particular month or that particular quarter, and what's our take on it. Now, of course, business and finance may or may not talk the same language, and they may or may not go the same direction, but it's always good as your responsibility to highlight it, because this is something that can be a game changer. So that's one good practice that we have, where we huddle up every week without fail, and that's a compulsory meeting that nobody misses, or very seldom misses, for maybe customer meeting or some other meeting. But it's very, very less that people miss that meeting, and we actually huddle up and strategize what each department is doing, what's the insight, what ripple effect does it have on other departments, and how do we fix that problem. So that's one particular example that I can think of, which happened very, very recently, in fact.
Awesome. So I'm going a bit tangent here, right? From the kind of operational work that we do, the role of a finance, and then to metrics, onto an entirely different segment of topic, which is not particularly related to SaaS, but extremely relatable to a fast-growing environment, which is fundraising, right? It's very natural that if you are in a market which requires you to have hyper growth and go fast, you require the fuel to propel, right? Not every startup requires fundraising, and you can grow without funds, but fundraising is an integral part of a fast growing environment, right? Want to understand the questions from you, hat of a finance executive, right? So what is the role of your role while doing fundraising, right? And how do you entirely structure the entire fundraising process, given that you've gone through 3 journeys of raising funds? Give us also anecdotal examples of how efficiently you can get that done as well.
Got it. So as a finance executive, I think there are startups that still follow the fundamental, where their accounting is outsourced for a very, very large period of time, which is fine, which is a good practice to have. Personally, that's my view. But the challenge over there is that you need to have somebody internally very strong that is full-time with the company, so that if there are any gaps in that particular reporting that the outsourcing company does, because they have a dime a dozen customers, right? You're not their only customer during the month-end closure, during provisions creation, etc., etc. You need to have somebody who's very, very strong in-house that can ensure that that outsourcing person can't take this company for a ride. Invariably or historically, we have seen that you'll have an outsourcing person, but the founders will be tech heavy, or they've done engineering in the past, but have little or no finance knowledge. And then when a third party comes in to audit it, they find gaping holes. So it's very essential, firstly, to have good outsourcing folks, but also have somebody in-house that can monitor what's exactly happening with the books of accounts. That I would say is point number 1. Point number 2 is always have your data room ready. You should be in a position where if your founder walks up to you and says, listen, I got an inbound, I really like this guy, it's a good value, he's giving tons of cash, tomorrow your due diligence starts, your answer should be, why should it start tomorrow? I'm going to start today. You should be that prepared with your data room. Your data room now is not, don't look at data room as data room only core finance, because at the end of the day, usually it's going to be the founder and invariably the finance head at your company that's going to lead the fundraise. And at some point of time, your founder is going to detach, because then it gets too much into numbers. So at maybe midway, you're the only guy who's sort of steering the entire ship from the fundraise perspective. So data room cleanliness is of utmost importance, and you should be ready. Even though your founder says tomorrow, you should actually have an answer saying that let's start raising today, let's start the due diligence today, I'm ready, good to go. So that's of paramount importance. Some very basic housekeeping rules that you can ensure that this data is right when there is a vendor that gets onboarded. Now the ERPs are of that level where the data capacity that they give you to store data is very, very large. Take that MSA or take that vendor agreement. When you're passing that particular journal entry, tag that vendor to tag that agreement to that particular entry, tag your invoice to your entries. Those very simple housekeeping rules, when you generate the report, all of it is in one place. You can do it very, very fast. So very small stuff like that can actually go a long way. I would actually say also, to add to that, is if you are not too confident on your data room, it's always advisable to do a mock DD. And there are a lot of firms today that do mock DD, both finance and legal. It will be really good if you can get somebody who can do that for you. To a very large extent, you can actually foresee what would have happened if you would have gone for a fundraise with the current data that you have. It can be good. The answer can also be that it's very poor, but that gives you enough time to switch gears. If it's good, then there's nothing more to do. But if it's bad, then it gives you that extra leverage of time to switch gears to get everything ready, so that, and also it gives you that level of rehearsal, right? Because a lot of these due diligence are three-way matching. It's not only one-to-one comparison. So it gives you that sort of rehearsal to tackle any questions, and you're always on top of your data. I feel if you're on top of the data from a due diligence perspective, both legal and financial, the team that comes in, I think, eases off the accelerator to a large extent, because you're so confident with the numbers and how you talk and how you present the data that you have. You need to have that level of confidence at any given point of time, saying that, no, it's not this way, it's this way. I have this document to back this. I have this email to back that. I think that drives the due diligence audit angle very, very quickly. You do not want to get stuck with that, because that just irritates the investors, as is the founders, and then that puts you under a lot of pressure, whether the deal is going to go through or it's going to fall through the cracks. So to avoid that, be confident, do a mock DD, both financial and legal. There are a lot of players in the market today that do really, really good jobs, and that come easy on the pocket. So you don't have to actually go out and appoint a big four, because they are going to be expensive, but you get a dime a dozen quality folks out there that are easy on the pocket to do that. So I would say that definitely get a mock due diligence done if you are not comfortable with your confidence. I would also say that you should also train your next level from a finance team perspective to handle queries. Many a time what happens, and it's a strategy that due diligence teams use, is that the guy who's leading the audit from any of the big fours will talk to the finance side, but then silently pushes one of his colleagues to another person in the finance team and tries to get out information. You need to train your team also to be very, very confident and also know the numbers and know what they talk. Again, it has to be in chorus what the finance team is talking. If I am saying that a customer churned today, your reportee who's sitting 10 rooms away also should know that the customer churned today. He can't say that I'll check the data and come back to you. That's something that you need to drive within your team, that if I'm not there tomorrow, you should be able to sail this ship by yourself. That also brings to them that added responsibility that although, listen, Amit has my back, but at some point of time, if I have to take the lead, I'm ready to take that lead. So that chorus again needs to come into your team, because there is a high probability that a colleague will slip through and pull out all information, and then you're again stuck with the due diligence saying that, Amit, you told me this, but your colleague is telling this, so now what's the right thing? You don't want to get stuck in that situation. Also, when you're talking to investors, I feel from a ARR perspective, again, I'm talking SaaS, but there is the investment team that will be constantly in touch with you every day basis to find out what's happening, because there's reporting going on from the audit team to the investors as well. They will be close. They will be monitoring your numbers to the T, to the decimal. You need to ensure your systems are up to date. You need to ensure if there is a cornerstone case, you know how to tackle it. So you have to be running real time, several hats together at that particular point of time. But if you can do that, and from the trend that at least I have seen, I joined when we were about to raise Series B. So I started my Series B process. It was not one of the largest rounds that we raised, but it took the longest time. And that took the longest time because these things were not fixed. Series C, very, very high ranked investor. We took half the time that we took in Series B. Series D, another very high ranked investor, we took half of what we took in Series C. So it's a learning curve that you need to ensure dips during time from a time perspective, not from a learning perspective. But more and more rounds you raise, the lesser and lesser time it should take. Also, I think what people do, and the mistake that I feel, is they don't select a good legal counsel. And I'm saying this mostly from an Indian parent perspective, not so much from a US parent perspective, because it's fairly simpler. But if you are an Indian parent, choose your legal counsel very, very wisely. Do not be worried about the fact that they charge you more money. Don't cut corners from that perspective. I say this for two main reasons. Reason number one, you want to have this person as good as a marriage, because this person can then help you to win points with each fundraise that happens. You are not going to win all the points that you and your founder want on day one or in Series B. It's a natural organic progression that you need to keep hitting the nail on the wall for it to actually sink in. You are not going to get all in one go. If you want all in one go, the fundraise will never see the end of light. So that's something that you need to keep doing. Choose your legal counsel very, very properly. Ensure that you tell them truthfully what you want, what's the current system like, every single thing. Be as candid like they are one of your own. Do not try to cut corners to choose somebody who is fairly cheaper. Choose a top firm, because one of two things happen. They also can tell you what is happening in the market today as to what points you should negotiate, as both the promoter as well as the company, that maybe other people aren't aware of. You may miss the bus where you had an opportunity to win a particular point. So I think from a fundraising perspective, if you have these points sorted out, I think it should be pretty fast.
One small question here, just before we close out. What typically, how long does this due diligence process goes? And, and then post due diligence and, and the closure of the fund, what is the role of finance at that time, and as well, and then what immediately is going to be, the engagement with the investor as well, post that point?
The due diligence timeline really depends on how fast and how aggressive you are. Now the issue with that is that if your incoming investor is not as aggressive as you are, then there's a problem, because then friction is going to come. So if you feel from your initial conversations at the time of signing term sheet that your investor wants to move fast, you need to be as fast as your investor, or otherwise faster. At that point of time, forget the 24-hour clock. There is no morning, there is no night. You just be at it nonstop, consistently. Show the same urgency. I think that will be able to pull down your timelines drastically to a large extent. Again, the same thing goes when you're negotiating your transaction documents. I think the easier part of a fundraise is getting through the financial due diligence as well as the legal due diligence, but the larger part is how do you get your transaction documents signed. And the bigger problem is, let's assume that you have 5, 6 large institutional investors on your cap table. Each of them have their in-house counsels. Each of them have their external counsels. So you're talking as a single person to a team of 3, each into 6. So you're talking to close to 18 people on on the same matter, but different views and how they want it positioned. You need to be aggressive, not from a road perspective, but you need to be aggressive, and you need to build that chemistry with each of those 18 people as you being the company. If you have a conflict, or if you have rubbed somebody the wrong side, it's going to take time. Try to be smart. Try to be easy to talk to when you are having casual conversations, but be aggressive when you have to. You need to have all 18 people. If I put all 18 of you all in a room, you would have a conversation without anybody getting to the root side. So that should be your core idea. Build that chemistry with all of those 18 people, but be aggressive when you need to win that particular point. Sooner or later, we shake hands in between. We say that, listen, not yours, not mine, let's just meet in the middle. Sometimes you lose some, sometimes you win some. You actually can go out and tell, if you build a strong chemistry, go out to the investor very candidly and say that, listen, these are my top 3 priority points. I want this because of this reason. I haven't given it to the previous investor, and therefore I do not want to give it to you. Have candid, clear, transparent conversations only if you have built chemistry with those investors, because at the end of the day, they want to get done with it. You want to get done with it. They have several deals that they have to chase. You have growth for the company to do. So you can't sit on this half of the year and then say that I raised the fund and feel happy about it. I think you need to finish faster, because once that money or capital comes in, the mood of the company changes to a more positive side, and then everybody wants to do growth, try experiment, try marketing, etc., etc. So let's spend more time on trying to do that. So long answer short, build chemistry and ensure that you are transparent when you can be. If you think you can't be transparent, talk to your founder, tell him these are the points where I think we should meet in consultation with our legal counsel. Why don't you talk to the partner at the investor side, talk to them, get that rationale, see how to make ends meet, and then call it a day. I think that's the best way out.
It's going to be pointed questions to you, and then you answer it, us with whatever comes to you at the top of the mind immediately. Yeah.
Yep.
Are you in for it?
Yes.
Great. So tell me your typical work day today. When do you start? What time you sleep? How many hours do you work?
I don't have any start date. I don't have any start time, no end time. Funny story, my wife actually thinks that I'm more married to Whatfix than her. So I think that's how it goes. No start time, no end time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So if you have to suggest a book, podcast, blog, any piece of content, right, to a person who's joining a SaaS fast growing environment, a finance person, what would that be?
Actually, I'm not a big fan of going into any particular topic in finance. If you like a particular topic, read that, because eventually finance is a loop, right? So you'll eventually read and get the 360-degree flavor of it. So I would actually say start from your core favorite topic. It can be fundraise. Eventually, you will have to know everything else that goes in the fundraise. So I would actually say start with what you love to read or listen to.
Okay, fair enough. Then my next question is, it's not topic, but it's skill, right? Let's say if you have to, apart from your core finance skills, right? If there is one extra skill that you think that your finance person needs to learn or possess, what would that be?
Communication skills, I think.
Okay, that's great. Very, very much important. My last question, right? Let's hypothetical question. Let's assume that you have a magic wish that you can time travel, you can go back, and if there is one thing that you want to change that you did wrong, or you think you might correct and make it better, what would that be?
I would automate all of my systems, and I will start hiring from day one.
Day one. Absolutely right. I'm going through that. Great. That said, we have come to the end of the show, Amit. It's been amazing. I think each of the sections by in itself that you spoke is an interview series altogether. Based on if it permits, if our audience loves it, we'll connect again and talk on a particular topic again in depth. Right?
Sure.
It was amazing having you. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for sharing all the insights that you've gathered so far.
Likewise, Arvind. Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching. If you like the video, share it with others. And as always, until next time.